have this impulse to connect, and I'm driven crazy, I'm frustrated, I'm saddened, I'm angered by the way in which radical movements who are ostensibly trying to build a world of cooperation and justice and care and love and dignity seem to constantly be tearing each other apart, factionalizing into little groups that think they've got it all figured out, that are so sure of whatever it is that they know is the strategy or is the right way to do things, or this whole sort of moralizing impulse. And it generates what I think one of the best terms to describe it is the circular firing squad of the left. And it's an incredible tragedy. And so I just have this impulse, and I think it's the anti-fundamentalist politics that I'm really committed to, which for me is actually a politics of some degree of uncertainty. We need to not be sure what must be done. And in fact, I think the Lenin's question, what is to be done, needs to be answered by more questions, and answered by experiments, and in a gentle way. It's because we don't know, we need to learn, and in order to learn, we need to experiment. We need to fail, and we need to be able to. This is not about sort of let's all just agree with each other and get along and squash debate. Not at all. Good learning is going to be about debate, but I always want to be trying to imagine what would it look like for us to actually be humble in each other's presence and to actually become vulnerable to learning from each other and to care for each other as a movement. So I think so a lot of the work that I do is coming from that impulse of trying to tell stories and create frameworks that help to encourage those forms of connection. And so for some of the cynical among us, it might seem like very sort of naive utopian kind of impulses. We do have real differences and they really matter. And I agree with that. But at the same time, we can't take ourselves so seriously that those differences become a matter of destroying the work that we're doing, right? So this image that I like to use of the butterfly, playing on the kind of metamorphosis of the butterfly as I think of not just a metaphor, but an actual instance of transformation. I like to think of these four wings of transformative action. And so I call them four wings of a transformative social movement. I'm using the word social movement very loosely there. There's whole worlds of debate about what exactly constitutes a social movement. I mean it more generally like motion of transformation, collective motion of collective transformation. So, ill-defined. In part because I don't know what a social movement is, and I'm not sure that we need to know what a social movement is. What we do need to do is to be connecting our work together in ways that amplifies, that creates synergies, that creates this mutual learning. So the butterfly, I think of, it's got this wing of defensive work, which is where I would think about all of the work that we broadly in lots of different ways do to defend our lives and communities from the things that are attacking. This is about communities defending themselves from racist violence, from gendered violence, defending themselves from colonization of land, from extractivism, defending practices of cooperation in the face of capitalist colonization. So crucial work. And then the work of offense, I think of as the work of actively trying to dismantle the processes and practices and institutions that are generating that violence, right? So that's where we think about how do we actually dismantle the colonial state? huge project, right? But we've got to be working on that, and people are working on that. How do we think about dismantling white supremacy, undoing it in a fundamental way? So that's the offensive work. Then the work of healing, sort of third wing, I think, is work that we underplay, at least underplay as a crucial part of a movement. A lot of that work is happening probably in part because that work doesn't happen in the streets for the most part, right? It doesn't happen in visible meetings very often. It happens in small groups. It happens one-on-one. It happens individually. But in some ways, so much of the history of left infighting might actually be the history of us playing out our traumas on each other. Because the systems we're trying to dismantle, the processes that we're trying to go up against are causing violence and trauma. And it's all too easy to play that trauma out again. And, the trauma circles around. And so there's incredible work happening in many communities to try and address trauma and to try and figure out how to heal so that we can actually stand in our power and move forward in new ways. So that work is utterly crucial. Without that work, the whole thing falls apart. Without that work, we build some really cool thing that ends up becoming terribly internally oppressive because we haven't actually done the work of healing. And then finally, the fourth wing for me is creation. And I think there, I'm broadly thinking about all the ways that we're actually building and enacting the world that we want to live in the here and now. So that's the work that solidarity economy organizing is trying to do. That's the work that community economies research and action is trying to amplify. So these four wings, obviously then there's this work of linking those four wings together. What's the sort of body of the butterfly that holds the four wings together? And I think in that space of linking are huge questions. What are the forms of organization that actually connect us? What are the stories that connect us? What are the languages that connect us? The ways of framing our movements? And we're going to experiment with those. I mean, some people want to use socialism. Some people want to talk about communism. Some people say neither of those words is going to be useful at all, given the baggage they come with. So in some ways, for me, commoning and livelihoods, those are ways of experimenting with languages that might help hold the butterfly together. And I think we need to experiment with many more kinds of languages. And they need to emerge out of conversations with our communities and our places to really hear what languages are people using to talk about their actual lives and struggles.